My name is Eleanor Hayes, and this is the most painful story I have ever told. For 39 years, I believed I had a marriage people secretly admired. We weren't wealthy, and we certainly weren't perfect. But I genuinely thought we had built something that would outlive us both. I was the woman who remembered every birthday, every anniversary, every doctor's appointment, and every little thing that made my husband smile. I thought those things mattered. I was wrong. If someone had told me that the woman my husband abandoned me for would be the one crying on the phone, begging for my help less than 3 weeks later, I would have laughed and said life doesn't work that way. Sometimes, life has a strange way of making people meet the consequences they spent years running from. But before I tell you about that phone call, you need to understand how a 40-year marriage can disappear without making a sound. There is a particular kind of silence that only exists inside a home where love has quietly packed its bags. It isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It settles into the empty chair across the dinner table, the untouched cup of coffee, the conversations that become shorter every week until eventually there aren't any left. I didn't notice it at first, or maybe I refused to. Every morning at exactly 5:30, I woke before my husband, Thomas. I ground fresh coffee beans because he insisted instant coffee tasted like dishwater. I ironed his shirts while the house was still asleep because he liked crisp collars. His breakfast was always waiting at 6:30 sharp. 2 eggs, whole grain toast, sliced tomatoes with just enough black pepper, and orange marmalade that I made myself every spring. For 39 years, I never missed a morning. Not when I had pneumonia, not after my gallbladder surgery, not even the week my own mother died. People often asked why. The answer was simple. Because I loved him. Not because he demanded it. Not because he expected it. Because every little thing I did felt like another stitch holding our family together. Love, I believed, was built in ordinary moments. I wish someone had told me that neglect is built the very same way. Thomas retired on a warm Tuesday in early September. The entire family came over. Our daughter, Rebecca, brought homemade lasagna. Our son Michael grilled steaks in the backyard, while the grandchildren chased each other across the lawn. Everyone laughed. Thomas smiled for every photograph. He hugged the children. He toasted to new beginnings. When the evening ended, he wrapped his arm around my shoulders and whispered, "We finally get to spend time together." I smiled all the way through cleaning the dishes. I had spent decades imagining retirement, weekend road trips, slow mornings, gardening together, watching sunsets from the porch we'd built with our own hands. For the first time in years, life belonged to us, or so I thought. 3 mornings later, Thomas didn't come downstairs for breakfast. I assumed he was tired. Retirement had only just begun. I carried his coffee upstairs myself. His side of the bed was perfectly made. The closet door stood open. Half his clothes were gone. So were his shoes, his suitcase, his watch collection, his shaving kit. I remember standing there with his favorite blue coffee mug still warming my hands. My first thought wasn't that he'd left me. It was that he'd gone somewhere unexpectedly. Maybe Michael had needed help. Maybe he'd gone fishing. Maybe. My eyes landed on an envelope resting neatly against my pillow. Just one word written across the front. Eleanor. The coffee mug slipped from my hands and shattered across the hardwood floor. His letter was only 2 pages long, 39 years together, reduced to less than 600 words. He thanked me. He actually thanked me for being a wonderful wife, for giving him a stable home, for raising beautiful children. Then came the sentence that changed everything. I've spent my whole life doing what everyone expected of me. For the first time, I'm choosing myself. I kept reading, because I was convinced there had to be another page, an explanation, a joke, anything. Instead, I found another sentence. I've met someone who makes me feel alive again. Alive. As though life with me had been a slow death. As though the years we'd spent building a family together had merely been something he survived. At the bottom of the page he wrote, "Please don't try to contact me. It will only make this harder." Harder for whom? Because I can promise you, it certainly wasn't harder for the man who packed his suitcase while I was downstairs making his breakfast. For the next week, people brought casseroles, flowers, sympathy, advice. You'll get through this. Men have midlife crises. He'll come back. You deserve better. They meant well. But grief doesn't listen to comforting words. Grief has its own language. Every evening at 6 o'clock, I still found myself setting 2 plates on the dining table before realizing there was only one person left to feed. Every Friday, I automatically washed his favorite navy sweater. Every Saturday morning, I reached for his side of the bed before remembering it had been cold for days. It's astonishing how many habits survive after love has died. Rebecca visited almost every afternoon. One evening, she found me folding one of Thomas's old flannel shirts. "You know he's not coming back." Her voice wasn't cruel, it was protective. I looked down at the shirt. "I know." "Then why are you folding his clothes?" I couldn't answer, because the truth sounded ridiculous even inside my own head. For 39 years, taking care of him had become part of who I was. Without that, I wasn't entirely sure who Eleanor Hayes actually was. Rebecca knelt beside me and took my hands. "Mum, you spent your whole life making sure Dad had everything he needed." She squeezed my fingers gently. "When was the last time you asked yourself what you needed?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came out, because I genuinely didn't know. 19 days later, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Something made me answer. A young woman was crying so hard she could barely breathe. When she finally spoke, my entire world stopped. "Mrs. Hayes, I'm so sorry to call you, but I don't know who else can help me." I didn't recognize her voice. Then she whispered 7 words that sent chills through my entire body. "I'm the woman your husband left you for." For several seconds, neither of us spoke. I could hear her breathing through the phone, short, uneven breaths that sounded as though she'd been crying for hours. In the background, a television played softly before someone muted it. Then there was silence again. My fingers tightened around the phone. Out of every possible person who could have called me that afternoon, she was the last one I expected. "I think you have the wrong number," I said quietly. "I don't." Her voice cracked. "My name is Claire." The name hit me like a stone dropped into still water. Thomas had never written her name in his letter. He had simply called her someone who made him feel alive. For 19 days. She had been nothing more than a faceless stranger in my imagination. Now she sounded painfully real. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I know I have no right to ask you for anything." "No," I replied, unable to hide the bitterness in my voice. "You don't." She didn't argue. She simply cried. "I don't understand why you're calling me." "You probably hate me." I stared through my kitchen window into the backyard. Thomas and I had spent years landscaping together. The roses were beginning to bloom. "I don't know you well enough to hate you." That wasn't entirely true. I'd imagined her 1,000 different ways. Beautiful, confident, younger. The kind of woman who laughed too loudly in expensive restaurants and wore perfume that lingered long after she left the room. The kind of woman who could steal a husband without feeling guilty. But the woman on the phone didn't sound victorious. She sounded frightened. I just. She struggled to breathe. I don't know who else to call. You could call my husband. I tried. The answer came immediately. He left this morning. I frowned. What? He packed his things and left. I honestly thought I'd misheard her. My husband had abandoned me after nearly 4 decades. Now, less than 3 weeks later, he had abandoned her too. What do you mean he left? I woke up this morning and her voice broke completely. The closet was half empty. My heart skipped. I closed my eyes. No, it couldn't be. The coffee on the bedside table had gone cold. My breathing slowed. She continued. There was a letter. The room suddenly felt smaller. I gripped the edge of the kitchen counter. He thanked me. She laughed bitterly through tears. He actually thanked me. Every word she spoke sounded painfully familiar. He said I deserved someone who could give me the future I wanted. Silence. Then, he said he'd spent too much of his life trying to become someone he wasn't. My stomach turned. Different words, the same ending. For the first time since answering the phone, I wasn't angry. I was confused. Thomas wasn't a man who acted on impulse. He planned everything: vacations, budgets, gardening schedules, even grocery shopping. If he had left me, only to leave her 19 days later, then where exactly had he gone? Mrs. Hayes? Yes. I know this sounds selfish. It is. I know. She sniffled. But I need to ask you something. I waited. Did he ever. She hesitated. Lie to you? I almost laughed. What kind of question was that? The man had just destroyed 2 lives. Of course he'd lied. But then I realized something. No. She sounded shocked. What? I never caught him lying. Not once. And that's what scares me. Thomas had never been a good liar. He'd been something much more dangerous. He'd been a man who omitted the truth. If he bought himself an expensive fishing rod, he simply forgot to mention the price. If work kept him late, he wouldn't invent a story. He'd merely leave out the parts I wasn't supposed to know. For years, I mistook silence for honesty. There is a difference, a very expensive difference. Claire finally asked the question she'd been building toward. Did he ever talk about his first marriage? I frowned. First marriage? Yes. I felt every muscle in my body stiffen. I'm sorry. What? He told me you were his second wife. I couldn't speak. He said his first marriage ended years ago. I whispered only 3 words. I was first. The silence on the other end was so complete, I wondered if she'd hung up. Then, oh my God. Her voice had changed. Not fear, not sadness, horror. She wasn't calling because she'd won. She wasn't calling because she'd regretted stealing someone's husband. She was calling because she had just discovered she had been living inside someone else's lie. Claire. How old are you? 39. Exactly 29 years younger than me. You knew he was married. I knew. She swallowed. I knew he said he was separated. Separated. Another convenient omission. We met almost 2 years ago. 2 years. My knees weakened. 2 years. While I had been making homemade strawberry jam because Thomas said store-bought tasted artificial. He had already begun building another life. You probably think I'm a terrible person. I looked around the kitchen. The ceramic cookie jar I'd painted. The hand-stitched curtains. The recipe cards I'd collected over 40 years. Every inch of this room had my fingerprints on it. Every inch. And suddenly, I realized something that surprised even me. No. You don't. I think you made a terrible decision. She quietly sobbed. But I don't think you're evil. People rarely destroy families because they wake up wanting to become villains. More often, they convince themselves they're walking into a love story. By the time they realize they're standing inside someone else's tragedy, it's already too late. Can I ask you one last question? You can ask. I don't know if I'll answer. She took a shaky breath. Did Thomas ever talk about me? I looked toward the letter still resting inside my kitchen drawer. He said you made him feel alive. She began crying harder than before. I knew it. Knew what? He used exactly the same words on me. I froze. What? He told me, her voice was barely audible now, that I made him feel alive. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't thinking about the pain Thomas had caused me. I was thinking about patterns, about rehearsed sentences, about carefully chosen words. How many times had he said that? To whom? And why did I suddenly have the uncomfortable feeling that neither Claire nor I had ever truly known the man we'd loved? That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was thinking about Thomas. I had already cried enough tears for the man I thought I knew. Instead, I kept thinking about Claire. There was something unsettling about hearing another woman unknowingly describe the exact same man I had shared almost 4 decades with. She wasn't trying to justify herself. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She sounded lost, the same way I had felt 19 days earlier. I hated that we had something in common. The next morning, I woke before sunrise out of habit. For nearly 40 years, my mornings had belonged to someone else. Even now, my body refused to believe that no one was waiting downstairs for breakfast. I stood in my kitchen staring at 2 coffee mugs, Thomas's blue mug and mine. Without thinking, I reached for his. Halfway to the coffee maker, I stopped. I looked at it for a long moment. Then I quietly placed it back in the cabinet. For the first time in 39 years, I made coffee for one. It should have felt lonely. Instead, it felt strangely peaceful. Around 10 that morning, Claire called again. This time I almost let it ring. Almost. When I answered, she apologized before saying hello. I'm sorry. I know I shouldn't keep bothering you. You aren't bothering me. That surprised both of us. I found something.